Chapter 6. Crests. I had a dream once. It was the only thing I was born with. There was compassion in my heart and a drive to strive for peace, to help others. Was that so wrong of me? I helped others and found it to be meaningless. At the end, it was all meaningless because saving others means killing someone else. Ilya looked down from the penthouse on Wednesday night. Her arms crossed over her chest as red veins coloured her eyes. Her eyes squinted as she studied the now barren streets of Boston. Struggling to keep her eyes open, she rapidly shook her head. These veins allowed her to see traces of elusive mana threads crawling across the streets, pulling apart the creation of the world and linking Earth to the cursed land of Pandora, a place their kind go when they die, most of them anyway. Some of them might be lucky and just end up in a hole in the ground. She steadily drank the mana from the air and the salty perspiration of Cullen and Alexander. It was refreshing, and she needed this after her third straight night of no sleep. She twirled her black hair with her finger. She remembered the previous night at Terry Nation, their own little hangout spot to make futile attempts to wind down, and of course the girl and boy who approached them out of, presumably, curiosity, whereas then greeted with hostility from Cullen. Such a shame, really. A part of the world she could never have, some silence, some peace, and a mind of harmless curiosity. They were curious, that's all. All I want is a friend, someone to talk to, and not have to worry about these damn threckets. Why was I born this way, and born into an endless war? Cullen and Alexander held out a map of the state of Massachusetts with multiple red markings on it filled with stars. All in all, there were over 200 stars on that map. Cullen and Alexander were talking amongst themselves. Alexander had dark moppy hair and was much broader than Cullen, but Cullen was not a small man. Blanca was eating a granola bar in the corner, seemingly exhausted. They all were, Ilya knew that. It isn't like she was the only one living in misery. Her thoughts lingered again on the hostility Cullen displayed towards the normie couple. "Cullen, must you be an unbearable ass to everyone we meet?" Ilya rebuked him, glaring at him. Her youthful face grimaced underneath her hateful glare. "They were only being polite. Something you could stand to do sometimes. People are polite to get close. You know this better than anyone. Besides, casters' rules. If they saw anything, you know what has to be done. Even a risk is too much," Cullen replied, never taking his eyes off the map. His eyes narrowed at the map. He tapped on the table repeatedly with his index finger. "I did what I did to avoid having to enforce that rule. After all, you know how much I just love killing unnecessary normies," he said sarcastically. "I fucking hate it." "You and I know you hate it," the white-haired Blanca said. Her red eyes looked compassionately to him, and then they narrowed towards him. "You act a tough game, but you're just like them." "We're not like them, and you know it. They don't know half of what goes on in the world, and they sure as hell don't know half of what's going on within their own hearts," Cullen replied. "Blanca, you know as well as I. We are forced to play a game in a facade, wearing our masks, but we can't remove them. They, however, can remove the mask whenever they fucking want. They can take that damn mask off. We can't, because we have a dark job to do. If they get too close, and they see something they're not supposed to see, you know we have to kill them. And let me tell you, that's a lot harder to do when you have a relationship with them." Alexander spoke up as usual to defend Cullen. "Lay off him. You know full well he's experienced killing more than any of us. Those orphans in China." Cullen was visibly uncomfortable. Ilya wished for his sake that Alexander would just shut up. She knew he wouldn't. God, if they'd just all died in that fire. He'd had shared drinks with some of the survivors. You know that. Still had to kill them, Alexander continued. Ilya wished he'd get off his damn high horse long enough to know he wasn't helping. She knew Cullen well enough to know when he tried to hide something. His usual hard stare softened, tears glimmering in his eyes. His right hand started to tremble, and he retracted it into his pocket. "It's a derrick job," Cullen growled and returned a glare to Blanca. "What happened?" Ilya asked. "Some jackass thought it would be funny to take some mana from the Grail and feed it to a normie. Yeah." Cullen was normally reserved about recounting this type of event. "Jesus, doesn't that cause a cosmic rift between dimensions?" Ilya had known that the incident had been large. She hadn't been part of the team 13 years ago and had never been brave enough to ask. "Yup, bloated the man up. Cosmic rift. Damn threckets from the other side the size of Germany. The whole show." Alexander chimed in. "The dude flew up into the sky. His body was like a giant freaking rock. A second moon. Then he just popped. Cursed essence everywhere." Ilya knew to shut up. Blanca did not. Did anyone survive? The mana did most of the job, and the creatures, but yeah, there were some survivors. I wasn't proficient enough to kill all the witnesses, too much ground to cover. But hey, who would believe them anyway? They'd just be escorted to some asylum before the administration found out. Bye-bye witnesses. Yeah, enough of the past. We can talk about that later. Alex turned his gaze to Ilya, pointing his index firmly on the map. Look, Ilya, are all those portal crests in place, and sufficiently fueled with mana? Yes, she replied. The source of mana was efficient, but in certain places will kill people that don't need to be killed. I don't like the way I had to do it. Will it last? He asked. Yes, there are plenty of them to disperse the energy at any given point. However, the source of mana isn't exactly going to be reliable in such a large area. She walked over to the table with the map and put her finger on a singular location. I could only afford to make a single seal there. It will act as a gate towards our one teleportation circle in Gosnold. However, with a population that small, the seal will not hold for long. If the seal breaks, the mana used in it will deplete. So, if we need to teleport there, the teleportation will exhaust the mana reservoirs in Gosnold, effectually killing the entire population. In other words, God in heaven forbid anything happens there. Everyone dies, and there is hardly enough mana left to make it back to the mainland. There are a few towns like that in Massachusetts. Blanca simplified the explanation. Cullen smiled to Blanca. And this is why I'm not an arcane wielder, because that is way too complex for me to handle. Not to mention I don't think I would even be able to pull something like that off. This is a good thing though. It means you don't have to use your own mana for that, and you can focus your energy on other things. Ilya brushed her hair behind her ears, tilting her head. Yes, but I still don't adore the idea of having things being done at the expense of humans who know nothing of us. They know nothing of the conflict. They know nothing of the hell we've seen. The hell, the demons, and the devils are just underneath the ground, and are not far off from wreaking havoc across all the earth. These humans who cannot even channel mana are merely expendable assets. They are nobodies. They choose to wear a mask that we are oppressively forced to wear. So what if they die in the process? If a small amount must be sacrificed along the way to achieve the higher good, that is acceptable. That is the code of a caster. Cullen's tone became harsh. This world is cruel that it would submit us to this fate, but that is not our choice to make. All our decisions were made before we were born, and there is nothing we can do about that. We have a hand, and we need to play that hand as best we can, and hope the other player has a crap hand or is a shitty card player. Ilya was silent, sitting on the windowsill, resting her elbow on her knee, and her hand covered her mouth. These normies were nothing but cattle to them, a stark and unfortunate truth, and she hated it. The code they are forced to go by calls for the killing of normies who see mana being used and other restricted activities. This was their way of coping. It was far easier to kill someone once you've stripped away their humanity. It is necessary, Ilya, Blanca sided with Cullen. I don't love the idea any more than you do, but what choice do we have? Cullen is right. They are tools and resources that we can use to do our job. You know the risk, we all do, and you know we have to keep it on the hush-hush. Which would you prefer, another world war or the necessary sacrifice of one small meaningless town? Alexander asked. I vote for normie extermination personally. Are you finished? There was silence. Cullen waited to speak more. All right, now that that's over with, Ilya, are any seals loosening? He asked. Half a moment, she said as she closed her eyes and folded her hands into her fists while resting her chin upon them. She reached out with her spirit, pulling in the mana from the air. Her flesh was crawling with emerald veins, which began to change colour from a green to sea blue and finally flesh red. She opened her eyes, and the flesh veins entered the whites of her eyes, and her pupils turned golden. She could see darkness with streams of light cascading over her vision. The many shapes tossed and turned into her sight as the seals remained locked. Her gaze shifted over towards Springfield, and the seals remained in place, and none of the Threckits attempted to unlock the seal nor tried to attack the barriers from the other side of Pandora. The veins disappeared from her eyes and body immediately, and her pupils returned to their normal colour. She took a deep breath as she focused on the door behind them, making sure that no one was listening on the other side. The hell remained silent in Massachusetts. They are not moving against seals or the gates. Good, Cullen sighed. I can't believe we almost didn't succeed here. Yeah, the loss was bad though. I'm certain the caster's administrator will call us back to London shortly, Alex said. Not likely, Blanca said. They'll want us monitoring activity here for a while before they declare this project safe and finished. They'll want to make sure the seals and transportation circles are working before sending us back for vacation. Vacation sounds nice, Ilya let out a sigh of relief. A little rest is in order. Hopefully we can make it. Yeah, Cullen agreed.